Good afternoon and welcome to Definity Live, a webinar series focused on running, improving, and growing your business through bold, relevant leadership. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Dave Hatter, the series host and a solutions architect and partner here at Definity Partners. Definity Live is designed to give you practical ideas that will help you transform your organization into a thriving environment while your teams actually run the day-to-day activities. We've got an exciting agenda for you today. It includes talking in detail about SIOP in your business, and in particular the Definity take on it, which is SIOP-Sync. We'll have some key takeaways for you today. We definitely welcome your questions, and please feel free to send them in as the presentation is ongoing. We'll work in as many as we can, and we'll have some closing remarks with our speaker. Our goal for you today really is to walk away with some basic ideas and some concrete concepts that you can take back to your organization and start to implement today. So with that, I'd like to welcome Rich Cary, our RIG Master Black Belt. Rich has been with Definity for quite a while and has a ton of experience and a wide array of industry experience working before Definity around this topic and in process improvement in general. So it's great to be able to welcome Rich today. And
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Rich. So tell us, Rich, you've been doing this for a while. When did you first hear about SIOP?
Well, Dave, I first heard the term SIOP in 1990 in my training as a U.S. Air Force officer. SIOP stood for Single Integrated Operations Plan. It had to do with our nation's nuclear readiness. I'd talk a little more about that with you, Dave, but then I'd have to kill you.
Yeah, please don't do that, Rich.
Okay. I heard SIOP again about 10 years later in a very different context, working for Allied Signal, which became Honeywell through acquisition. We were rolling out a comprehensive SIOP process, only this time there were no nuclear weapons involved. It was sales, inventory, and operations planning. It was part of the steering team in our aerospace division to help deploy the SIOP system. And I had a chance to learn firsthand some of the complexities and concerns around deploying this type of methodology and learn from some great people.
And obviously this is a key concept for businesses, and I know it's maybe not necessarily a well-known topic. Everybody has sales, and everybody has inventory, and everybody has planning to some extent, right? But they may not think of it in this particular context, and obviously things have changed drastically over the last 10 years since you first started to get exposed to this in industry. So why don't you kind of bring us up to speed on what you've seen happen since then?
Well, Dave, it's been interesting, the amount of interest in SIOP just in the last couple of years. Heard more and more about it. There's been more buzz and more questions about SIOP than really I've seen in my career. It's interesting. You wonder why. I think this next chart really highlights some of the reasons why. At the risk of sounding like Mr. Obvious, we went through a very severe recession that hit manufacturing as harder than any other industry. And as you can see, this chart shows new orders, new manufacturing orders across U.S. manufacturers. And as you can see very easily, when the recession hit in 2008 and really bottomed out in 2009, it was very deep and very painful. A lot of manufacturing companies really had to change the way they operated just to survive, and many didn't, unfortunately. But we saw a very, very rapid recovery as we went into 2010. But it's been interesting. Many refer to it as the jobless recovery. You know, many manufacturing companies made tremendous strides in productivity that they're not willing to give up now just because orders are looking better and the industry is rebounding. So there's been many things that are different about manufacturing post-2009 than prior. And I think you can see it in just the new order patterns here. As you look at the orange line that indicates, you know, general trend and direction, and you can see a very, very rapid year-over-year recovery. But what's interesting is to look at the blue lines on this graph, which shows month-over-month variation in new orders in manufacturing. And this continued right on through 2013 and right into the new year, seeing tremendous variability. Growth opportunities are coming up and going away very quickly. And I really believe from a business leader standpoint, the challenge now is to make really tough decisions about growth and be able to do it quickly, because really the growth is going to those manufacturers that are opportunistic, those that are nimble and flexible enough to make bold bets and to be able to take on tremendous growth in a very short time period. Clark Schaefer Hackett last year in their manufacturing survey, every year they bring forth in the survey the biggest concerns of manufacturers in the U.S. And what was interesting last year in their 2013 survey, that the number one concern that was being brought up by manufacturing leaders was integrating and growing, being able to grow at a quick pace. You look at these numbers and it's no question why.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, and obviously things have changed drastically, and I agree with you completely that folks that are positioned to move fast and have some serious success. I think you had a pretty interesting video queued up you wanted to show us today, Rich. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it'll demonstrate. I think anyone listening that has been in manufacturing for a while, I think will be able to relate to this. Growing is difficult in manufacturing, especially in doing it quickly. And it can often lead to a tremendous amount of conflict and lack of alignment within a business. And I thought this little video, if you could listen to the conversation, we're in a boardroom of a manufacturing business. Tell me if this sounds familiar to you.
We're about to lose one of our best customers, and I want to know how the hell that can happen. Burger, you guys closed this deal. How did you figure we could deliver 26,000 units this quarter? Hollander said we could increase capacity if we needed to.
Well, hold on a minute. What I said is we could gear up to increase capacity, but that takes time. I can't do it overnight. Right now, our capacity is based on current projections.
What projections?
Well, same estimate I've used for the past 12 months. Last quarter, plus 2%.
Where did that get us to?
17,000 units. We might be able to max that up to 19,000 tops.
But of course, that's just a theoretical number. Theoretical? Yeah, realistically, I've only got enough components ordered for 14,000 units, which is based on the projection I was given. Who gave you those projections? I want to know who gave you those projections. You did, sir.
So who gave you those projections? I think that the relevance here is the fact that the old rules just don't apply anymore. The last quarter plus 2% is not a growth strategy that is going to be a winner for most manufacturing companies. They're being asked to make decisions about growing 40% and doing it inside lead time windows that they've never performed to before. And it's requiring business leaders to have confidence to make bold bets, and very often they're struggling to do that. I was just a couple years ago during the worst part of the recession. We worked with a company. It was a tier 1 automotive company whose biggest competitor had gone bankrupt as a result of the downturn. They actually closed traffic on the road leading to their plant for an entire afternoon as semi after semi arrived with tooling from their competitor to be dropped off to gear up production at their site. And it was interesting, the downward spiral that we saw when we arrived on site. The day I got there, I learned that 3 of their biggest customers were camped out in conference rooms in various parts of their facility. And they were there with one purpose. They were there to micromanage their schedules, to meet twice a day with the team and understand where their parts were and how they were going to prevent shutting down automotive assembly plants. This downward spiral was leading this company, which had an opportunity to grow massively. They'd gone from about less than 20 direct line employees to over 100 in less than 60 days. They had a huge opportunity to grow, but much like in this video, they felt terrible about it because they didn't know how they were going to integrate it. They were failing in their ability to grow at that type of rate, and it really led to that downward spiral. It created a lot of conflict and just froze them from a decision-making standpoint.
Yeah, I can only imagine how tricky that would be to be under that kind of stress from a customer perspective, and then throw on top of that 80 new employees in a short period of time trying to meet all that demand. You know, in my mind, that speaks to not only a lot of stress, but how do you step back and put in systems that help facilitate that growth and make that a successful process moving forward, as opposed to something that just explodes under its own weight.
If you think about this video, that team should be thrilled that they closed a huge order, that they had an opportunity to take advantage of a huge growth opportunity, and as a result, instead they're talking about the fact that they stand to lose one of their biggest customers. That is the challenge business owners are facing in this new world. They have got to be less reactive and a lot more proactive, and that really is the key to this whole topic.
We're about to lose one of our best. We're about to lose. Oops.
All right, let's talk a little bit about where this fits from a run, improve, grow standpoint. If you've been on our prior webinars, or if you've read Ray Attia's book, The Fearless Frontline, you're familiar with this concept. In its simplest form, every company has to do three things. They need to run their business, they need to be able to improve their business, and they need to be able to grow. We've been talking a lot about the challenges around growing. It's not just market-driven challenges. Very often those are even to a greater degree internal challenges. If leadership is spending all of their time managing the run of the business, if they've not given their frontline teams the capability and the tools to be able to simplify, standardize, and manage the run, they're not going to have an opportunity to spend the time they need to and improve. And as we look at this triangle segmented a little bit more, you can see it's not just not reactive improvement, but proactive improvement that's needed. And in many ways, SIOP is, Sales, Inventory, and Operations Planning, is the infrastructure for growth. It is the vehicle to proactively improve your business. I just a few weeks ago had an opportunity to talk to the president of a mid-sized manufacturing firm about some of their growth challenges. And it was interesting. He made a comment to me. He said, this morning, he said, I'm so frustrated with my team. Just this morning, I was sitting in our production meeting, and I learned that one of our most critical orders had got pushed out into April. And this is an order that services the oil and gas industry, which we all know is exploding in the Dakotas and elsewhere. And he was furious that his team was not finding a way to make it happen. Not finding a way and what he counseled his team, he said, if we have to drive those parts to the plater and park in the parking lot overnight to make sure they prioritize this, then that's what we need to do. Because if we don't execute on this, we're not going to be able to grow more in that industry. And I think in many ways he felt he was being very proactive, but the reality was he was being sucked right into the bottom of that triangle. He was firefighting. He was coaching his team on how to firefight better. It really leads to us needing to define what proactive improvement is much better. And I think my favorite definition is right here from Peter Senge from many years ago in his book, The Fifth Discipline. You know, he said very often proactiveness is really just reactiveness in disguise. And the way you can tell is that you're always fighting against the enemy out there. Now, the enemy out there can be another function in your business. How could sales make that commitment without talking to me first? Why would we put together a schedule like that and not have our suppliers on board? Or even more sadly, it can be a situation where the enemy out there is your customer. How can they have those kind of expectations of us? How can they expect us to deliver that way? And that's usually a sign as we work with companies, the sign that they're in the worst possible shape from a run, improve, grow standpoint is they truly believe their enemy is their customer and their unreasonable expectations.
That's a good place to be when you make the customer the enemy.
Yeah, exactly. And it happens more often than not. Maybe not in the front office, but certainly you go walk the shop floor, you can really get a feel quickly for where you're at from a run, improve, grow standpoint by by how many enemies the business sees that are out there somewhere, rather than taking their own ownership and seeing the role that they play. So, one of the steps here is you have to be able to see how you contribute to the situation that you're in to be able to get out of that situation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And one of the things I like to try to tell people, from an analogy standpoint, is you get stuck on that treadmill where it's always set to 12. You can't really ever focus on anything except just going as fast and as hard as you can. And there's never any time to figure out how to make the system better so that you could have a more holistic overview of the business, and you could figure out how to handle that growth and be happy that you got that great big order. So tell us how we're going to do this, Rich, with SIOP.
Well, we've got to stop being marathon managers, and that's what we've been talking about a bit here, and really drive proactive improvement. Now, this is not something you just decide to do. There's a process, and that's what we'll talk about today. Probably a good place to start is to really talk about what SIOP is, and more importantly, and then talk about SIOP-Sync and what those differences might be. So as we look at the traditional definition of SIOP, I mentioned it's sales, inventory, and operations planning. Many of you listening may have heard this alternatively as just called sales and operations planning. This is not a new concept. It's been around for many, many years. And traditionally, what this has meant is simply, in its most simplest form, is the balancing of supply and demand. So if we think about the scenario that we witnessed in the video, this is a negotiating process. This is a what we'll call a proactive process, although many times it's proactiveness in disguise. But it's how we bring those things into balance. So a traditional sales and operations planning model would take this big opportunity that sales has found and try to break it down and find ways to negotiate internally and negotiate with their customers, ways to bring supply and demand into balance. They've managed the trade-offs. Based on current capacity and what we can do in the short term, here's what we can deliver. Now let's go back to the customer and see if we can't break this order up. Let's see if we can't negotiate a different delivery schedule. Let's see if we can't lower their expectations and find a way that we can meet in the middle. And that has very much been the traditional view of SIOP, or sales and operations planning. We really distinguish what we call SIOP-Sync from that definition in the sense that SIOP-Sync is a fully integrated, systematic business management system or process, ultimately designed to make decision-making easier. If you think in terms of run, improve, grow, we want to be able to simplify the run and put processes in place that allow us to make proactive improvement and do so as simply as possible. To not make things more complex, to not analyze more, but to actually have the ability to make good decisions in a much more simple way. And that really is the outcome we're looking for with SIOP-Sync.
So Rich, you used the term systematic here, systematic business management system, right? But what does that really mean? I mean, are we talking about technology? Are we talking about manual processes, some combination of all of the above? So to someone that's not entirely familiar with this, what do you really mean by that?
That's a great question, Dave. I think many people in this age, when they hear systems, they immediately start thinking in terms of computer systems, software systems. SIOP-Sync is enabled by technology, and technology plays a key role. But SIOP-Sync is not a software package. It's not a system of automation. It is truly a business management system, and we call it a system and not just a process because it's systematic. It really is the opposite of living in silos. It's systematic and integrated in the sense that it involves everyone. Everyone in the business plays a role, every function and every role, and not just within the business. Customers and suppliers need to also play a key role in this process to be successful.
So you mentioned technology there, and I'd just like to bring up a key point just to reinforce it for our listeners today. again, it may involve technology, it may not. You really have to improve the processes and understand where you're going sometimes. In fact, most of the time before it even makes sense to try and apply technology to it. Again, I think people lose sight of the fact that, we're going to throw all this technology into the mix, somehow it's going to make things better. And in many cases, it just enables you to make mistakes more quickly. You can never get to the heart of the real problem. Mm-hmm. So I just like to throw that out, and I think it's really about thinking we're planning, right? Planning the process and doing this negotiation to make sure you can meet demand and grow.
That's a great point, Dave. I often get asked by companies, should we upgrade our technology first to be an enabler for SIOP, or should we put in a good SIOP process and then implement technology to support it? And the right answer is neither of those extremes. Really, you should be implementing new technology tools as you implement SIOP, as you go through the SIOP process. They should go hand in hand and complement each other in the process. I think very often companies think until we implement that new ERP system, until we implement those new technology tools, we're not going to be capable of implementing a good SIOP system. And I think the mistake they're making there is they're allowing ERP or their tools to dictate their process rather than vice versa. ERP should be a tool of a good SIOP process, not vice versa.
Yeah, and I agree with that too. You can't let technology dictate the process. Most of the time that's not going to work. It's better to have a really good process and then make the technology fit that process and enable and enhance that process.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about that implementation process. For the sake of simplicity today, let's just break this down into what we call the 3S implementation model. If you're thinking today, I need to implement new SIOP processes, let me say, first of all, you do not need, maybe this is a scandalous statement to make on a webinar about SIOP, but you don't need SIOP to run your business. There are plenty of manufacturing companies that are running their business just fine using traditional scheduling methodologies. In fact, this is not a scheduling methodology anyway. You can run your business without SIOP. My argument today is that you cannot create sustainable growth for your business without a good SIOP process. It is truly the infrastructure for growth, and not just incremental 2% quarter-over-quarter kind of growth, but to be able to make that step-level growth that many of the companies we're working with are needing to make. They're not growing 2% year over year. They're having opportunities to grow 40, 50, 60, 100% year over year. And without a proactive SIOP process in place, it's just extremely difficult and can really lead you to the brink of bankruptcy if you're not careful.
And that's obviously a bad.
Yeah. So simplify, standardize, and then sustain. So as you look at this graphic, it really hits on some of the keys here. When we talk about simplifying, first, we're simplifying the run really in three critical areas. Simplify the way you view and manage inventory. Simplify how you understand the demand streams of your business. And then thirdly, simplify your current existing planning processes. These really are necessary steps to then move into the standardized phase where we're standardizing our supply and demand planning processes. And once we at least have some basic standardization in place, that's where the SIOP-Sync process then really kicks in by building a new management system. It's kind of like taking that first iteration of Run, Improve, Grow and refreshing the model. If we want to take the progress that we're making in Run, Improve, Grow to the next level, we want to go from R1 to R2 or Grow 1 to Grow 2. We've really got to upgrade our management systems to make that possible.
So give me an example of that, Rich. When you say upgrade your management systems, can you give us an example of maybe a particular customer story that would highlight this for our viewers?
Well, let's go back to the video we showed at the beginning. and maybe we can contrast what a traditional sales and operations planning model might consider, which we've already done to a degree. We need to balance supply and demand. We can only increase capacity at a certain rate. We only have a supply chain that can support a certain number of components. We have lead times. We would do the analysis. We'd go back and enter into the negotiations with our customer. We'd want to be able to show that potential new customer or that customer that's bringing growth that we can deliver, but that we need to deliver on a realistic plan, and here's our true capability, and we'd attempt to negotiate. If we could not win that business, very often we end it feeling really good about ourselves, that we didn't commit to something that was unreasonable, that we didn't take unnecessary risk with the business. And I can remember in my past, in various plant management roles, almost feeling a sense of relief that this big opportunity that was out there didn't pan out because of the impact it would have had on our business. And it's just absolutely the wrong place to find yourself now. A SIOP-Sync process, a mature process, how does proactivity look different? I think in this case, you would have already been having conversations with your key suppliers. First of all, you'd know who those key suppliers were, and they're different for every business. But you'd have a relationship with them. You would have already been talking about ramp-up plans with them. So I'll give you an example of a company that we worked with had a tremendous opportunity to grow globally. They had an international distributor that said, we would like to expand just on an unprecedented scale. But as most new opportunities come, they didn't want to wait a year to do it. They needed to do it now. If they were going to be opportunistic, they needed to ramp up and place orders today. In about half the lead time that the company had traditionally delivered some pretty complex lab equipment. So one proactive step they were able to take because of good SIOP planning was to pull in a couple of their key suppliers that fabricated parts for their business, but they've been having proactive conversations around increasing the value add of that business. So a fabrication company, for example, wanting to do more assembly work, wanting to increase the value add that they delivered. And in this specific case, they had an opportunity to take an entire sub-component process and move it to that key supplier. They were able to ramp up, they were able to dual source through some of their sources, and be able to ramp up that sub-assembly production, which allowed the OEM to then move resources to really their key intellectual property area, which was the final assembly and calibration of this equipment. And what that did was, through the help of that supply partner, allowed them to really make a bold bet on their delivery. And I'll tell you that company's had the best first quarter so far in the company's history. They're executing on that as a result. And not to mention the side benefit, that when you did the math, they saved about 10% on the assembly of that sub-assembly over doing it in-house. So that you look for those win-win opportunities as part of a good SIOP-Sync process, and you do it proactively. You've already had those conversations when the opportunity comes up.
You literally took the words right out of my mouth. I was just about to say that sounds like a pretty amazing win-win kind of environment. How often, Rich, do you see out there in the real world dealing with customers and so forth where, they, in trying to build those kind of win-win relationships with their suppliers, it's tough, and it ends up, because this obviously goes beyond the bounds of your own company. You can only do so much of this stuff internally if you have to rely on suppliers. And how do you find the right suppliers? How do you deal with the suppliers? How do you get them on board to give you what you need? And is that a sticking point in an area where folks have trouble implementing a good SIOP plan?
That's a great question. Not only can upgrading your management systems be disruptive internally, it can be disruptive externally. I think every company needs to take a look at their supply base, have some good supplier scorecards in place, and really evaluate their suppliers not on the 30-year history they may have with them, but on their ability to support them being more flexible, more nimble, and support their growth plans. And some suppliers may not come along for the ride when it's said and done. So it's important to do that analysis. I'll say on the flip side, it also means treating suppliers a little differently from moving from treating them as vendors to truly treating your supply base as partners. Nowhere did I see that as strongly as I did in my first job. My first manufacturing position was as a line supervisor for Hitachi Automotive Products. And I remember one year we actually took a significant amount of our internal capital budget and bought a new piece of equipment for one of our key suppliers. And just looking back, it's the only time in my career where I've taken my own capital for my business and used it to buy equipment for a key partner, a key supplier. I think the mentality for many years was if they can't meet your needs, go find somebody that will. I think you have to have a different mentality to really be successful. You have to invest in your supply partners. So if you want that supply partner to do additional value add, and that requires them to make an investment, you don't want to just guarantee volumes to them. You want to be able to invest in their business, and that might mean actually investing real capital and helping that business grow. I mean, anyone that's worked especially in the Japanese automotive world knows about the karetsus and these tight supplier partnerships, but it's been a real key to the success of Toyota and others in being able to do that.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty radical approach, actually buying equipment for another company. But obviously, if you want to make that supply chain strong and create that kind of partnership or your relationship, that's got to be at least something that's in consideration. I realize it's not going to work in every conceivable environment. That's a pretty radical but interesting step.
Dave, what's even more valuable than capital in many ways is information. It also means being very transparent with your customers and your suppliers. Transparency is a key element of a great SIOP process. Being transparent internally with your employees, but even more so being very transparent with the rest of the supply chain. Sharing your forecast data with them, sharing the scenario planning that you're doing, bringing them into the process. While we made many mistakes in our SIOP implementation at Honeywell, I think one thing we did very well is we would often invite our customers to come be part of our SIOP planning process. And it created a level of trust and transparency that I think they really appreciated. When we would sit in our SIOP-Sync reviews or in our executive SIOP meetings and talk about issues and barriers in our business that we were working on, I think it gave them great confidence that we were truly being proactive in managing our business. We just didn't pretend things were perfect, but brought them into the process, and very often they were able to help.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, Rich. I guess I would ask the question, though. I know sometimes transparency is scary, if for no other reason, because if it's new to your organization, you have concerns that the customer will not like what they see, right? Or the suppliers won't like what they see. What would you say to folks who think this sounds like a good idea but don't know how to begin, or are concerned that they'll get pushback within their own organization and won't be able to take that step?
Well, Dave, I think that goes right back to the model that we still have on the screen here. Is one of the biggest mistakes we see companies make is we talk about the sustaining piece of SIOP-Sync, which is a cadence of supply and demand meetings that ultimately leads to an executive SIOP review. And they take that away and say, well, great, I need to implement these meetings next month. We will adopt this new cadence. We'll start having an executive SIOP meeting and rolling out this one plan. But because they haven't focused on the simplify and the standardized piece, those executive reviews just turn into unproductive conflict. Everyone comes to the room operating under different assumptions. Operations shows up with their capacity data and their proof that they're working really hard. Supply chain shows up with their story. Sales shows up with their opportunities, and in the end, it just creates a lot of unproductive conflict. That's why you really have to start this process, and it can take a year or more working through the simplification and standardization groundwork that needs to be laid before you start having an executive SIOP meeting and inviting your suppliers and customers to come be a part.
Yeah, and so then that makes sense to me as well. How do you take that then back to your organization and say, well, this could take a year. We want to start to make proactive improvements now. We can't wait a year. So where do you start with that? How do you get this going?
Well, a great place to start is again with the simplification. It can have tremendous benefits, immediate benefits. So the three areas we highlighted there really were around demand. So if we go to the next slide, we'll kind of just show what this involves. Understanding your demand streams is a critical first step. Especially with how they've changed in recent years. Truly stepping back, most companies don't do this really for a couple reasons. They're so busy managing the day-to-day, they're sitting in the parking lot at the plater waiting on that part rather than taking the time going through and understanding their demand streams. And probably another equally valid reason is they're just simply overwhelmed with the data. In most companies, they have a lot of data at their fingertips, a tremendous amount of data, but it's really the transactional level. So I can throw you gigabytes worth of transactional data, whether it's production data, shipment histories, product line data, but it is just overwhelming. It's a tidal wave of data that just overwhelms you. And to sit down and sort through that data and pull something meaningful from it can become such a difficult exercise. And then there's frustration that once you do pull meaning out of it, that it may be outdated by the time you have the opportunity to review it and make decisions. So again, understanding those key demand attributes and then putting systems in place that allow you to aggregate and analyze those demand patterns become really critical. The same goes for inventory. We mentioned inventory. Many companies will measure inventory based on sales dollars. If you're an operations manager and listening to this webinar, you know how frustrating it can be to be told you need to grow, you need to improve your on-time delivery, and you need to cut your inventory dollars by 30%. Good luck.
Yeah, that sounds like quite a challenge.
Yeah. But it's very typical of what ends up going into a business plan. And the big mistake there is we've not tied inventory to demand. Some companies will try to overcome that by using metrics such as days of supply. It's a better measure, certainly. But again, days of supply is just simply looking at, based on historical demand, how many days of supply do we have in-house? There are some better metrics out there. Inventory velocity is one that's gaining a lot of popularity, which really looks at not only how many days of supply do we have in-house, but based on product lines, do we have the right mix? And of course, that implies a good understanding of demand streams. And then finally, the third element is just simplifying your scheduling processes. Very often, just the day-to-day scheduling process is so complex, so full of exceptions, so full of spreadsheets that have to be maintained and systems that have to be updated that it becomes unmanageable. And really starting in those three areas is a great place to start, and you're going to see immediate benefits from doing that.
So I know I've heard you use the term before, create a supply model. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. That really gets into that second S, the standardized phase. The two key elements that need to be developed as part of a good SIOP-Sync process is a single statement of demand and a single statement of supply. It's interesting that you want to know about supply models because that is most common. Give me the operations plan for how we're going to grow. But the reality is we need a single statement of demand first. You can't put together the operations plan and then later figure out what the demand is and what we need to be able to do. That would be the equivalent of what we watched in the video, where I put together an operations plan that says last quarter plus 2%, and sales is out there making bold bets, and we're totally disconnected. It's got to flow the other way. So the first step is to be able to put together that single statement of demand. To really be accepted across the organization, there's really three things that single statement of demand needs to do. One, it needs to be statistical. It needs to be based on data, not gut feel, not here's what I think or what I guess is going to happen, but some real statistical analysis put into demand patterns, into seasonality. Again, technology tools become enablers here to be able to do this quickly. But not only statistical then, we need to have the ability in our single statement of demand to predict revenue. That's very important to sales, to finance, to other parts of the business. But we need to take that next step as well and be able then to translate that into predicting volumes. I know as an operations leader, it was not helpful for me to know that this year's business plan is last year's revenue plus 8%. That did very little to help me plan well and be proactive. You know, the immediate questions are, you know, what product lines, what products, what customers, how much of that growth is pricing adjustments, what special promotions are we planning, you know, but what kind of volumes do I need to be prepared for? Many sales organizations, and not just sales organizations, all of those that affect demand, often are very hesitant to do that. But a statement of demand that says we're going to grow and we'll figure out where it's going to come from later. And oh, by the way, it's going to be a hockey stick. Q4 is going to be huge. Right? That's not the single statement of demand that we're looking for. And that really requires a collaborative demand process. Everybody that affects demand, you know, customers, the sales organization, the field service and salespeople, the marketing department, they all need to be involved. Engineering is one that's very often overlooked. What's our new product development demand? What are we predicting? It drives a level of accountability that hasn't existed previously, and that can become a major challenge that has to be overcome.
So I know we're getting close here on time. We've got a little time left. I want to make sure that you hit whatever other considerations we haven't talked about so far. I know you've got some other slides you wanted to work in. So why don't you kind of take us to what else do we need to know, and also how do we tie this back in? If we want to get our frontline leaders out of the run, how do we tie this back to Run, Improve, Grow with the various people who would need to be involved in this?
Okay, Dave. Well, let's make one final point, and then we'll go into that, because that really is the critical part. I was presenting a SIOP workshop just last week in Columbus, Ohio, and I had an individual that was attending, a VP of operations, that asked a very similar question. She said, I understand the concept here. I can wrap my arms around that, but I think the real challenge for my business isn't going to be the tools and the concepts. It's going to be the culture change that'll need to take place in our business that we have to go through, and that really is a key. You know, as we compare, you know, just balancing supply and demand, you know, if you have a culture, the arm wrestling culture, we come into our business planning meetings and we fight it out. And it's a matter of give and take. It's a matter of making trade-offs internally. That culture is going to have to change to really be successful with a SIOP culture. And what that needs to change to, as you can see in this second graphic, is a culture that focuses on systems and where we can gain leverage. So this isn't reducing demand to match supply. This is being proactive to make sure we find leverage in our operations and our supply chain to be able to meet the demand and the bold bets that we need to make as a business, that our business leaders need to make to be able to grow. So again, I always like to say systems, not silos. This is all about taking a systems approach, having business leaders that are able to step back from their functions and look at the system as a whole, and where leverage can be gained. And that's critical. As we look at the roles in the business, let's jump ahead just a couple. As we talk about upgrading our management systems, there are a lot of roles in the business that have to be aligned to run, improve, grow. I think you could argue that every employee in the business needs to become better aligned to run, improve, grow. As you think about different areas, where would marketing's role need to change from a run, improve, grow standpoint? Well, they'll have to move from running promotions to being able to drive improvement and really make predictions about what kind of impact those promotions are going to have on the business. It'll be a higher level of accountability than they've had. Sales will need to step up and be able to make commitments around volumes, around timing, around customers, which is going to force a higher level of accountability. But I think where the rubber really hits the road is in some of these roles like production, scheduling, and planning. Just imagine for a moment sitting across the table from your master expediter. This is the person who spent the last 10 years putting out fires every day in your business, and they're good at it. When you've got a customer emergency, they're the first ones that you call. And they'll put in the hours. They know all the tricks of the trade. They know the levers to pull. They know how to push things through and to be a hero. Imagine sitting down with that employee and saying, I know I've given you bonuses in the past. I know I've given you perfect performance reviews. I've told you what a key you are to the business. I've hugged you on the shipping dock as something went in the truck that I never thought would happen. But we really need to change the way we run this business. And I need you to be more proactive. And I need you to support this SIOP process. And we need to simplify those processes that you know how to manipulate and manage so well. It can be a shock to the system. And in its worst case, you can have a planner that is struggling mightily to make that adjustment. But it's got to happen from a run, improve, grow standpoint. They've got to go from being consumed with the run to being knowledge workers that are always thinking every day about how we can improve. And that's really the power of this. That's the power of run, improve, grow. As you create a company full of people that are thinking every day, how do we make it better? How do we help the company grow and understand where they fit in the process of helping their business grow and make bold bets. They're excited when they hear that sales has an opportunity that could double the size of the business in a matter of months. They're asking sales to bring those challenges to the table. And it's a very different culture.
So, Rich, I know we got some questions coming in here. We're almost in our question and answer window. What would you say, just to kind of tie up any loose ends before we get to that, what are some key takeaways from the straight material we've covered today?
Well, I think a few. I think it has to start with that the old rules don't apply anymore. No matter how robust your forecasting and planning processes have been historically, I would challenge anyone listening today to step back, not be complacent, but really ask, is it adequate for what we need to accomplish? Again, you don't need SIOP to run your business, but you need it to create the infrastructure for sustainable growth. I think another key takeaway really goes back to that drawing, the arm wrestling of supply and demand versus the gaining leverage. It's systems, not silos. Where can we gain leverage in our system, and how can we make plans today that allow us to be proactive in the future? If you're not stepping back and saying, how could we grow this business by 50% this year? And what would it take, and what do we need to be working on to have the kind of supply partners and the kind of systems to make that possible? You need to be thinking in those terms. Systems, not silos. Think across not just your function, but think across the whole supply chain. Where do you need to be building those relationships? Most companies that we work with that implement a robust SIOP-Sync process, part of that implementation is taking it on the road. It's the road show. It's going to your key suppliers and going to your key customers, and educating them on the why of this process and how it's going to create win-win opportunities for everyone involved.
Gotcha.
And maybe just some final, I had a slide in here on some common pitfalls. This might be a good chance to take a look at that. I guess just the prior, beware of some of the common pitfalls. First one I've already mentioned. It's just implementing a bunch of new meetings, trying to upgrade a management system when the business is running the way it always has, when you've not addressed the simplify and standardized steps that need to be taken. Having technology tools that just don't do the job. I think going hand in hand with that is systems that are only known to super users. I think most people can relate to the spreadsheet that has so much going on in the background. There's only one person in the business that knows how all those formulas and macros tie together. That is not a sustainable process for you, especially in the day when technology applications, custom applications are so available. So again, don't build a process that relies on interconnected, complex spreadsheets. It's not going to be efficient enough for you, it's not going to be transparent enough, and it's not going to be robust. You don't want to wake up tomorrow morning and find out that your entire process just fell apart because a macro is giving a runtime error. It's a sick feeling, but it's a very common issue. And I think that last one, that SIOP's too successful. This is a management system, not a short-term intervention. So when you start to see success in this process, you got to stay the course and stick with the cadence. It's absolutely critical. There's always a temptation to say, why can't we take our monthly SIOP process and just do it quarterly? Well, you just reduce by 2/3 your ability to be flexible and be proactive. So stay the course when you get the system in place.
Here's a couple questions for you, Rich.
Mm-hmm.
What's the best way to set projections, and who should we rely on outside of our own organization as part of that process?
That's a great question, and I don't want to give the standard "it depends" answer, although it's hard to not do that. Every company's demand planning, their demand structure and their demand streams can be very unique. It really starts with your business planning process. SIOP does not replace your business planning, so you really need to think in terms of doing that strategic analysis, having those long-term goals identified, understanding the markets in which you operate, having a good new product development strategy in place. Those are all keys. I mean, they create the mile markers and the finish line that you measure the success of your SIOP process against. And then it really comes down to that collaborative forecasting process, getting everyone, including your customers, involved. And I'll tell you how, I'll give you an example from my career where I almost got burned by this. When I was working as a VP of operations for a contract electronics manufacturer, one of our largest top 3 customers, their order stream, their demand absolutely exploded. We had grown by almost 50% with them during the new year. It was keeping us very busy, helping us be very successful. We were very excited about that. But when we stepped back to truly understand that demand, and when we pushed our customer to help share that forecasting data, they were very hesitant to do so. So we started doing our own market research, and the bottom line, through that collaboration, through pushing our customer to be more transparent, we actually had one of the buyers confess that they were ramping up their orders to get more inventory on their shelf so they could bid this work out to others in the industry. So something that we were very happy about, we should have been very, very concerned about. And really the gap there is that we did not have that transparent communication with our customer that we needed. Once that was on the table, we had a great opportunity to be proactive and say, what is making you consider this, and how can we work together to work through those issues?
Here's another one for you. What should be the main driver for SIOP implementation? it can come from a mid-level manager. I mean, does this have to come from the top down, or can someone say, hey, this makes sense, and I may not have executive buy-in yet today, but I want to be a key driver because we need this in our organization?
That's a great question. I think one of the most common excuses in any business is if the top doesn't buy in, we're just wasting our effort. And if you're a mid-level or even a frontline leader, on this call, I would challenge that assumption and tell you to stop making excuses, because that's really what it is. If you look at the 3S implementation process that we talked about earlier, it does not take top executive buy-in to simplify your planning processes. It doesn't take top executive buy-in to seek to better understand your demand streams or to better manage inventory and have better strategies and around inventory planning. Even standardizing, creating a single statement of supply and demand, those are things within the control of those supply chain leaders, those operations leaders. The magic of this process of SIOP-Sync doesn't happen in the boardroom at the end during the executive SIOP meeting. The magic is that meeting where the demand and supply elements of the organization get together at the mid-manager level and collaborate and develop one plan that they can go execute. I don't know of a senior executive anywhere that would find that objectionable or something that they would oppose. Make them a believer if they're not already. Share this with them and get started, because the benefits early on are going to pay off.
I agree with you completely. Sometimes you just got to lead by example, and then small incremental improvements in tri-storming will eventually help people at the top see, even if they don't buy in, there is a path forward, and hey, this could make sense for us, and we could implement this here and see the kind of benefits that you're talking about. So I agree with you completely. Sometimes, you got to just take that first step. You seem like other people are going to follow. Well, I know we're just about out of time here. So, are there any other specific thoughts you wanted to tell our viewers before we sign off here?
Well, I will maybe a couple ways to sign off. One is to give a shout out to those frontline leaders out there that help make this process work. You go to any good manufacturing company, and I'll tell you, you're going to find a lot of great frontline leaders that are making it happen, that are making improvements to the business, that are helping them be successful. And they play a key role in SIOP-Sync as well as Run, Improve, Grow. If you've got a great frontline leader working for your business, nominate them for the Fearless Frontline Leader Award. If you go to fearlessaward.com, you can learn a little bit about that. We have lots of awards out there for great CEOs and entrepreneurs. We really want to highlight the frontline leaders that are bringing manufacturing back in America, and it's a great way to give them some recognition. I'd say that the final next step is Definity Partners has a very comprehensive assessment process that allows us to find gaps in your SIOP and your sales, inventory, and operations planning processes. We've taken those tools and created a very simple assessment form. And I want to encourage anyone listening to send me an email. It's at the end of the presentation here. Send me an email, and I'll send you a PDF of that one-page assessment. We use it in our workshops as well. I'd encourage you to print those out, to take the assessment yourself and give them to your team and see where they stand. You may have some surprises. At one of our workshops, we had a group from a manufacturing company's corporate office and a group from one of their plants. And when they went through the assessment, the corporate office rated their SIOP-Sync progress at a 4 out of 5, and the shop floor rated it at about a 1.5. And it was an eye-opener to the team to realize that just because they had a system in place didn't mean that it was effective at every level. And this assessment will really help highlight some of those things. So send us an email. We'd be glad to share that assessment with you, and it could be a great next step to understand where your gaps are.
Well, thanks again, Rich. We really appreciate your time today. That was great, and you shared some great key insights with us. And I do want to encourage anyone who's listening or might pull this up online later, since this is being recorded and will be available as a podcast. If you have questions or you'd like that, definitely let us know, and we'll do everything in our power to get you an answer. Thanks again for joining us today. We plan to be on every month with different topics and experts from the field to talk about leadership and operational excellence. You can check the Definity Partners events page to keep track of the upcoming webinars as well as other events. For example, we've got a seminar coming up in Columbus in April, Lean Sim workshop. So if anyone's interested in that, check that out. We'd love to have you come. Again, thanks for joining us today. Next month, we'll have HPWP Consulting talking about how to build a high-performance workplace, and we hope to see you then. Thanks a lot. Have a great day, and